ChatGPT said. Amma was 60 years old, and her face carried the marks of years of work, love, and sacrifice. She had spent most of her life caring for her family, raising her children, and tending to the land that had been passed down through generations. Her days began early when the sun was still rising, and ended late after everyone else had gone to bed. She had worked in the fields, carried water, cooked meals, and sold goods at the market. Everything she earned and everything she owned went toward her children. Her son, Kwaku, had always been strong-willed and ambitious. As a boy, he used to follow her to the farm, asking endless questions about how to plant maize or when the rains would come. He grew into a man who wanted more than farming. He often spoke about the city, about business, and about making money. Her daughter, Efua, had a softer heart when she was younger. She would sit by Amma in the evenings, helping to prepare food and listening to stories from long ago. Amma once believed her children would grow into adults who valued family above all else. But things had changed. With time, the love Amma had poured into her children seemed forgotten. Kwaku rarely visited unless he needed something. Efua still came around, but her eyes often lingered on Amma's land and the things inside the house rather than on Amma herself. They both had families of their own now, but instead of bringing their children to spend time with their grandmother, they mostly came to ask about money, food, or pieces of land they hoped to inherit. Amma noticed it all but remained quiet. She had always been a patient woman, the kind who believed that time would reveal the truth about people's hearts. Still, the loneliness weighed heavily on her. In the evenings, when the compound was silent, she would sit outside, looking at the stars, wondering how everything had changed so quickly. The same children she had carried on her back, the same ones she had stayed awake with when they were sick, now treated her as if she were only a keeper of property, not a mother to be loved. Relatives also added to her pain. Her late husband's brothers and cousins whispered constantly about her land. Some even came to her house pretending to check on her health, but Amma could see through their false concern. Their questions always circled back to her land and her money. They assumed that because she was old and alone, she would not notice their greed. Amma smiled politely during these visits, but her heart hardened. She knew that the day she died, they would fight like vultures over everything she had worked for. Despite their neglect, Amma remained strong. She woke up every morning and tended to her farm. She cooked her own meals, cleaned her home, and even helped some of the children in the village with food or advice. Unlike her own family, these children appreciated her kindness. They greeted her warmly, helped her carry firewood, and listened to her stories with eager eyes. It reminded her of the love she had once received from her own children, and it gave her the strength to keep going. But the bitterness in her heart grew. Not because she wanted riches or fame, but because she had given her children everything, and in return they gave her nothing but neglect. She remembered how, when her husband died, she had been the one to stand firm, to make sure her children still had a roof over their heads and food on their table. She had sold jewelry, pawned clothes, and worked through sickness, all so they could continue their schooling. None of that seemed to matter anymore. At night, Amma often spoke softly to herself. One day they will learn. One day they will see that greed destroys more than it gives. She held these thoughts close to her chest, never sharing them with anyone. Outwardly, she was still the same quiet, gentle woman everyone in the town respected. Inwardly, she was planning. She did not want to leave her legacy in the hands of those who would waste it. One Sunday afternoon, she overheard Kwaku and Efua whispering after church. They thought Amma was asleep, but her ears were sharp. "The land behind the river will be mine," Kwaku said firmly. Efua shook her head. "No, Mama promised me that land years ago. You can take the smaller plot near the road." Their argument grew heated and Amma's heart sank. She realized they were already dividing her possessions while she was still alive. It was then she decided that silence was no longer enough. If she left them to their own ways, they would destroy each other, and everything she had worked for would vanish. Amma's mind returned to a memory of her husband. Before he died, he had warned her gently, "Do not let greed break this family. Watch carefully, and when the time comes, act wisely." She had carried those words in her heart, but now they rang louder than ever. The time had come. She could not allow her children's selfishness to consume them. Though her face showed calm, her spirit burned with determination. She began to think of ways to test her family, to see who truly cared for her and who only wanted her property. She knew it would not be easy, and that some would call her actions strange or even cruel. But Amma was not afraid of being misunderstood. She was a woman who had lived through hardship, through loss, and through loneliness. What she feared most was leaving behind a legacy of division and greed. That night, Amma sat alone in her room, a lamp flickering beside her. She took out an old wooden box where she kept important papers, and as she touched the documents inside, her lips curled into a quiet smile. Her children and relatives thought she was weak, that she was blind to their schemes. They did not know that she was watching, waiting, and planning. In her silence, Amma had grown wise. She saw through every fake smile, every false word of concern, and every greedy glance. And in her heart, she carried a decision that would shake her family to its core. They believed she was powerless, but Amma knew better. She was not done yet. What her children did not realize was that their mother had already prepared the beginning of a plan, one that would outsmart them all. ChatGPT said. Amma's body began to grow weaker with time. She could no longer move as quickly as before, and some days she had to sit down and rest after only a little work. The lines on her face deepened, and her steps slowed. Word spread quickly among her children and relatives that her health was failing. To them, this was not just about her well-being, it was about what she would leave behind. Kwaku, the eldest, was the first to show his impatience. He came to her house one morning, speaking loudly as if the neighbors needed to hear his words. "Mother," he said firmly, "you know I am the eldest. It is right that the land should pass to me. I will take care of it better than anyone else." His tone carried more demand than respect. Amma listened silently, her hands folded in her lap. She had grown used to his boldness, but she felt a sting in her heart. Kwaku was not talking about her health or her comfort. He was already laying claim to the land as if she were gone. Efua came a few days later, and her approach was softer, but her eyes betrayed her. She sat beside Amma and held her mother's hand. "Mama," she whispered, "you know I have children of my own. The money in the house will help me take care of them. Kwaku already has enough. It is only fair that I get the larger share." Her words carried a sweet tone, but Amma could feel the weight of selfishness behind them. The arguments between Kwaku and Efua grew worse with every visit. At first they spoke in hushed voices, but soon they began shouting even in front of Amma. "The land is mine." Kwaku would roar. "You are greedy." Efua would snap back. Their voices shook the walls of the house. Relatives, hearing of Amma's condition, began to join the quarrels. Some sided with Kwaku, saying tradition gave the eldest son the right to inherit most of the property. Others sided with Efua, saying Amma had the right to choose who received her possessions. Yet none of them truly cared about Amma herself. Not one asked her if she had eaten that day, or if she needed water, or if her nights were filled with pain. All they wanted was what she would leave behind. Day after day they gathered in her compound, their voices filling the air with greed. They circled her like vultures, each waiting for their chance to take a piece. They pressured her to write her will quickly, pushing papers in front of her, calling lawyers she had never met, and arguing over who would sign as witnesses. Amma sat quietly through it all, her face calm, her eyes sharp. She spoke little, only nodding or shaking her head when they pressed her too hard. Inside, however, Amma's mind was not weak. Her silence was not from confusion but from wisdom. While they shouted and fought, she was watching them closely. Every word they spoke, every selfish demand they made, was like a stone building up in her memory. She saw their hearts clearly now, hearts filled not with love for their mother but with hunger for wealth. At night, when they finally left her alone, Amma sat by her lamp, her thoughts deep and steady. She looked around her room, at the wooden chest where she kept her papers, at the chair her husband had once used, at the walls that had witnessed years of sacrifice. She thought of the time she had gone hungry so her children could eat. She thought of the nights she had stayed awake, nursing them through sickness. And she thought of how quickly all of that love had been forgotten in the face of property and inheritance. Her chest tightened, not from sickness but from disappointment. Still, she did not allow herself to cry. Instead, her lips curved into the faintest smile. They thought she was weak. They thought her silence meant defeat. But Amma was already shaping a plan inside her heart, a plan none of them could see coming. She knew her children well. Kwaku's pride was too large to hide. Efua's sweetness was only a mask for her ambition. The relatives, greedy and loud, would never be satisfied with anything less than taking it all. Amma understood that if she gave in to their demands, her family would tear itself apart after her death. So she decided to teach them a lesson, one that would stay with them long after she was gone. The days passed and her health grew worse. She coughed often, and sometimes her hands shook when she held her cup. Her children noticed, but instead of caring, they grew more impatient. Kwaku came again, pounding his fist on the table. "Mother, time is short. Write the will now. Give me what I deserve." Efua shouted back, "You are only thinking of yourself. Mother knows I need the house. Why should you get more?" Amma looked at them quietly. She did not argue, nor did she raise her voice. She only nodded slowly as if she agreed. Yes, she said softly one evening. I will prepare my will soon. Her words brought silence for a moment, then greedy smiles spread across their faces. They thought they had won. They thought her strength had finally broken. But Amma's eyes told a different story. Beneath her calmness, a fire was burning. She began to make small moves. She called on an old friend from the village, someone she trusted deeply, someone who had no interest in her wealth. Quietly, she asked for advice and for help in setting her plan in motion. They spoke in whispers, away from the ears of her family. The friend agreed, promising to keep her secret. Amma also started writing letters in the late hours of the night. Her hands trembled, but her words were firm. She placed each letter carefully in her wooden chest. These letters, along with the true will she was preparing, would one day expose the greed of her family. By day, she allowed her children and relatives to believe she was tired and confused. She let them argue and demand, watching them show their true selves. By night, she built her plan piece by piece, smiling at the thought of their faces when the truth was revealed. Amma's health may have been failing, but her spirit was sharper than ever. Her family thought they were outsmarting her, but they did not know the woman they called weak had spent 60 years learning patience, wisdom, and strength. In her silence, Amma was becoming dangerous. And soon her revenge, quiet, clever, and unforgettable, would begin. Amma's steps were slow but determined as she walked into the lawyer's office that afternoon. The room smelled faintly of polished wood and paper, the kind of place where important matters were decided. The lawyer, Mr. Mensah, rose politely and helped her into a chair. He had known Amma for many years, but the calm, firm look on her face that day was different. Madam Amma, he began kindly, I hope you are well enough to be here. You should be resting at your age. Amma gave a small smile. Rest will come later, Mr. Mensah. Today I have something more important to do. I want to talk about my will. The lawyer nodded, reaching for his pen and paper. I see. Your children have been asking me when you would come. I suppose they are expecting the usual division. Land for the son, house for the daughter, and money shared. Amma's eyes hardened. That is exactly what they expect. But they will not get it. Mr. Mensah froze, pen midair. I don't understand. You don't want to leave your property to your children? No, Amma said softly, her voice carrying more strength than her body. They are only waiting for me to die so they can fight over what I built. They do not care if I eat or if I am sick. My son Kwaka looks at the land like it is already his. Efua dreams of the house as if she built it. Neither of them asks me how I feel, whether I am lonely or whether I need help. I gave them my life and they gave me only greed. The lawyer leaned back, thoughtful. So what do you want done with your estate? Amma straightened in her chair. Her back hurt, but her heart was steady. I want all of it placed into a trust. My land, my savings, and even my house will not go to them. It will belong to the people. The land should be used for farming, the money should fund a school, and the house should be turned into a community home for widows like me. Mr. Mensah's pen nearly slipped from his fingers. Madam Amma, he said slowly, are you certain about this? Your decision will shock everyone. Your children will feel betrayed. Amma's eyes did not waver. They betrayed me long ago. This is not revenge. This is a lesson. If they had shown me love and care, I would have given them everything. But their hearts were filled with greed, and greed deserves nothing. The lawyer sighed. It is your right, of course. But you must understand, this will cause conflict in your family. Amma gave a bitter smile. Conflict already lives in my family. I have listened to their shouting, their fighting over who gets what. They argue even while I am still breathing. Do you think peace will come if I leave them the land and the money? No, Mr. Mensah. They will tear each other apart. I would rather my wealth bring peace to strangers than war to my own children. There was silence in the office for a moment, broken only by the scratching of the lawyer's pen as he began to write down her words. Amma watched him, her heart both heavy and light at once. Heavy because she was cutting off her own blood, but light because she knew it was the right thing to do. As the lawyer worked, the door opened quietly and Kojo, Amma's loyal housekeeper, stepped in. He carried a small bag for her medicines. Seeing the papers on the desk, he hesitated. Mama, he said softly, are you sure about this? Amma looked at him warmly. Kojo, you have been with me for 20 years. You cooked for me when I was weak and you cared for my farm when no one else would lift a hand. You have seen how my own children treat me. Do you think I am wrong? Kojo shook his head slowly. No, Mama. You are not wrong. But it will hurt them deeply. They hurt me deeply first, Amma replied. Her voice trembled but did not break. I begged for their love. I prayed for their visits. Instead they sent their demands. When I am gone, let them learn. Let them see that life is not about grabbing wealth, but about giving love. Kojo lowered his gaze, his heart heavy with sadness but also with admiration. He had always respected Amma for her strength. Now, watching her take control of her destiny, his respect grew even deeper. Mr. Mensah cleared his throat. Madam Amma, I will prepare the full documents and arrange for witnesses. You must sign them soon to make this official. I will sign them today, Amma said firmly. I do not trust tomorrow. My body is weak. But today I still have power. And I will use it. The lawyer nodded, writing quickly while Amma leaned back in her chair. Her mind drifted to the faces of her children, Kwaku proud and demanding and Efua sharp-tongued and restless. Once, when they were young, they had clung to her arms and laughed around her. She had worked long hours in the sun just to give them food, just to see them smile. She had thought her sacrifices would bind them to her heart forever. But time had revealed the truth. Love, when not returned, becomes empty. Her children's hearts had grown cold, caring more for her possessions than for her presence. That was the wound she carried. That was why she was here. Finally, the lawyer pushed the papers toward her. It is ready. Sign here. Amma took the pen. Her hand shook slightly, but she pressed her signature onto the paper with determination. She signed every page, every line until the documents were complete. When she put the pen down, she let out a long breath. It felt as though a heavy stone had been lifted from her chest. She was not afraid anymore. She had taken back control of her story. Kojo placed a gentle hand on her shoulder. Mama, you are brave. Amma looked at him and gave a small smile. No, Kojo. I am simply a mother who has been disappointed. But today I have found my peace. The lawyer stood and bowed his head. Madam Amma, what you have done will change lives. Perhaps not your children's the way they expect, but certainly for many others who need help. Amma rose slowly to her feet. Let it be so. When I am gone, let the world remember me not as a woman who left riches for greedy hands, but as a woman who used her last strength to give back. With Kojo's help, she walked out of the office. The sun was setting outside, painting the sky with gold and red. Amma paused, breathing in the evening air. She felt free, as if the burden she had carried in silence had finally been lifted. For the first time in many years she smiled, a true smile, not forced or hidden. She had chosen her path and no one could take it away from her now. The air in the lawyer's office was thick with expectation. The family had gathered, dressed in fine clothes, whispering and glancing at each other with greedy smiles. Kwaku sat in the front, his chest puffed out like a proud rooster. As the eldest son, he was sure the land and properties would be declared his. Efua sat beside him, her eyes shining with excitement. She imagined herself walking through the grand house as its new owner, servants at her call. Around them, cousins, uncles and other relatives waited impatiently, each hoping for a piece of Amma's wealth. They spoke in low voices, almost unable to contain their joy. Finally, we will see what Mama left, one cousin whispered. I hear the land alone is worth more than gold, another added. She must have given the money to her children, of course. Who else would she leave it to? The room filled with quiet laughter, but when the lawyer, Mr. Mensah, entered, silence fell. He placed a thick file on the table and adjusted his glasses. His face was solemn and his tone carried respect. Ladies and gentlemen, he began, we are gathered today to hear the last will and testament of Madame Amma, your mother, your sister, your relative and your friend. She lived a life of hard work and sacrifice. Her final words deserve your full attention. Everyone nodded quickly, leaning forward. Kwaku rubbed his hands together, barely hiding his excitement. Efua's lips curved into a smile. Mr. Mensah cleared his throat and began to read. To my beloved children and family, Amma's voice seemed to come alive through the lawyer's words, strong and steady despite her absence. I leave behind not just land, money or a house but a lesson. I gave you my years, my strength and my love. Yet in return I often received neglect, demands and quarrels. Even while I lived, you fought over what would be mine after I was gone. I saw your greed and my heart broke. The room grew still. Whispers began, but the lawyer raised his hand for silence. Amma's words continued. But I am still your mother and I wish for you to learn. So I have chosen to use my wealth not for your selfish desires, but for the good of many. My land will be turned into a community farm, to feed those who hunger. My house will become a shelter for widows, so no woman will sit in loneliness as I did. My money will be placed into a fund for children's education, so that knowledge may grow where greed once stood. Gasps filled the room. Some relatives covered their mouths in shock. Efua's face drained of color, her smile frozen. Kwaku's fists clenched tightly, his body trembling with anger. Mr. Mensah continued reading, his voice calm. If you, my family, truly wish to benefit, you must work together in these causes. Only through service and unity will you gain any part of what I left. If you refuse, then you will have nothing. This is my wish, my decision, and my final word. Silence. Heavy, painful silence filled the room. It was as if the air had been sucked out, leaving only the sound of hearts beating wildly. Kwaku was the first to burst out. This cannot be. She was confused. She was old and weak. This is not fair. His voice thundered through the office, making even the walls seem to shake. Efua jumped up, her eyes wide with disbelief. How can she give strangers what belongs to us? We are her blood. We are her children. She had no right to do this to us. The cousins and uncles began to mutter angrily. A farm? A shelter? Education for other people's children? What about us? Mr. Mensah closed the file firmly. This was her will, written clearly and signed with full mind and health. It is legal and binding. Your mother outsmarted you all. You cannot change it. The family erupted into shouts. Some accused the lawyer of lying. Others accused Kojo, the housekeeper, of tricking Amma. But Kojo, who sat quietly in the corner, shook his head slowly. His eyes were full of both sadness and admiration. He had been there when Amma signed the papers. He knew she had planned this carefully. Amid the chaos, Amma's words echoed in every heart. I gave you love. You gave me greed. Kwaku slammed his fist on the table. She betrayed us. All my life I waited for this land. Now it goes to strangers who never knew her. His voice cracked, filled with both anger and shock. Efua sobbed loudly, her hands clutching at her dress. How could she shame us like this? To make us work like common people? To tie our names to farms and schools? I cannot accept this. But deep inside, even as they shouted, a flicker of truth burned. They knew Amma was right. They had been greedy. They had neglected her. They had forgotten the woman who gave them everything. And now she had left them with nothing but a lesson. One of the uncles, older and calmer, finally spoke. Perhaps this is her wisdom. Perhaps she wanted us to change. You call it betrayal, but I call it justice. The others glared at him, but his words hung in the air. Mr. Mensah closed the meeting with finality. This is the will. Whether you like it or not, you cannot undo it. If you want to benefit, you must honor her wishes. The relatives left in anger, their faces dark, their hearts burning. Kwaku stormed out, his steps heavy, his pride wounded. Efua followed, her sobs echoing down the hall. The rest of the family scattered, each lost in their thoughts. Only Kojo remained behind, standing quietly in the office. Mr. Mensah looked at him and said softly, She trusted you. She said you were more of a son than her own children. Kojo's eyes filled with tears. She was more than a mother to me. She was my strength. And now her lesson will remain. Outside, the sun broke through the clouds, casting light on the world Amma had left behind. Though her children saw it as punishment, Amma's will was not revenge. It was a gift of wisdom wrapped in sacrifice. She had given her family one last chance to find true value, not in money, not in land, but in love, unity, and service. They had been outsmarted, yes. But more than that, they had been given a chance to change. Whether they would take it or not was left in their hands. Kwaku and Efua sat in silence long after the lawyer closed the file. The noise of their angry relatives faded outside, but inside the office, everything felt heavy. Their faces showed disbelief, then anger, and finally something neither of them wanted to admit, shame. The mother they had once pushed aside had spoken her final word, and there was nothing they could do to change it. 4 days after the reading of the will, the family refused to accept it. Kwaku stormed around the town, shouting that Amma had been tricked. Efua wept to anyone who would listen, telling neighbors how unfair it was. But the people of the town admired Amma's choice. They spoke of her with respect, praising her wisdom. She was clever, they said. She saw the truth in her children's hearts. She has left a gift for all of us. The more they heard these words, the smaller Kwaku and Efua began to feel. At first their pride fought against it. They wanted to believe the community was wrong, that their mother's actions were cruel. But when they visited the land again, their hearts shifted little by little. The land they had once fought over now held a group of workers clearing weeds, preparing to plant yams, maize, and cassava. Kojo, the loyal housekeeper, guided them with care. Children laughed as they carried small baskets of seedlings. Women sang as they tilled the soil. The land was alive in a way Kwaku had never seen before. "This should have been mine," Kwaku muttered under his breath. But even as he said it, he felt a strange stirring inside him. He had never seen so many people working together with joy. Efua too watched quietly. She had imagined herself selling the land for quick money, using the house to impress her friends. Now she saw women who had lost their husbands finding hope as they painted the old walls, preparing the house to be a shelter. She saw children who had no place to sleep running into the yard, their laughter echoing against the walls. "This was Mama's dream," Efua whispered, though her voice shook. Slowly the truth began to take root in their hearts. If they wanted to gain anything from Mama's estate, they had to join the work. At first they resisted. Pride pulled at them like heavy chains. Kwaku hated bending his back in the sun, hated taking orders from Kojo, who was once just a servant. Efua struggled to cook with the widows, her hands unused to hard work. She wanted fine dresses, not aprons stained with oil. But Ama's will was clear. Unless they worked, they would gain nothing. And so, little by little, they began to join. Days turned into weeks and weeks into months. Slowly, Kwaku's hands grew strong and calloused from farming. He learned how to plant and harvest, how to listen to the wisdom of elders who guided the work. At first he felt humiliated. But then he noticed how the community respected him, not for his name or position but for his effort. Children greeted him with smiles. Farmers clapped his back when he worked hard. For the first time in years he felt useful. Efua too began to change. She spent her days helping in the shelter, cleaning rooms, cooking meals and caring for children. At first she did it with a frown, but soon she realized how much the widows depended on her. They shared stories of pain and loss, and slowly, Efua's heart softened. She began to laugh with them, to sing while cooking, to hug the children who clung to her skirt. She discovered a joy that money had never given her. The family, once torn apart by greed, began to see each other in a new way. Kwaku and Efua, who once fought over everything, now worked side by side. Their arguments did not vanish overnight, but slowly they learned patience. They began to understand what Ama had tried to teach them all her life. That true wealth was not in what they owned but in what they gave. The community farm grew, feeding families who once went hungry. The shelter filled with laughter and hope, a safe place for widows who had been forgotten. The education fund opened doors for children who had never dreamed of going to school. Everywhere, Ama's name was spoken with love and respect. And her children, though at first unwilling, were shaped by her plan. One evening, after a long day in the fields, Kwaku sat on a wooden bench, his shirt damp with sweat. Efua joined him, her hands smelling of soap from washing dishes at the shelter. They sat in silence for a while, watching the sun set over the land that had once divided them. Finally, Efua spoke. "Do you think Mama knew we would change?" Kwaku's voice was low, almost broken. "She knew. She always knew. She saw through us when we could not even see ourselves." They sat together, the weight of regret heavy but mixed with a new kind of peace. Their mother was gone, but her wisdom still lived in them. Kojo walked by, carrying a basket of harvested yams. He stopped and looked at them with a small smile. "Your mother was wise," he said softly. "She wanted you to learn, and you are learning. That is her true gift." Kwaku lowered his head, shame burning in his chest. "We wronged her," he admitted. "We thought only of ourselves. And yet, she still cared for us even in her last act." Efua wiped her eyes. "She outsmarted us all. And now I see, it was not to punish us but to save us." From that day forward, Kwaku and Efua stopped fighting against the will. They embraced it fully. They worked not for riches but for the values Ama had lived by: kindness, humility, and service. They discovered that the revenge they once feared was not truly revenge, but a lesson that freed them from their greed. Years passed and Ama's legacy grew stronger. The farm became a model for other towns, the shelter overflowed with hope, and the education fund raised children who became teachers, doctors, and leaders. Everywhere, Ama's name was remembered with honor. And in quiet moments, when Kwaku and Efua stood together on the land, they felt their mother's presence in the wind, in the laughter of children, in the songs of widows, and in the fruit of the soil. She had won, not with anger, not with punishment, but with wisdom that outlived her. Ama had given them everything in life. And in death she gave them the greatest gift of all, a chance to change. Her family never controlled her wealth, but her wisdom controlled them. And in the end, that was her ultimate revenge. Ama had outsmarted them all. The end.